So Paul Greengrass came on the show last week to talk about this, and it opened on Wednesday simultaneously in Netflix and in a certain number of cinemas. We did talk about the fact that this is one of Netflix's largest theatrical releases, because up until now, Netflix have had a habit of just putting things in a very, very few cinemas, enough to get awards qualification, enough to get critics' reviews, but not enough that anybody could actually practically see it. We have got some mail about it because obviously I think that a number of people have seen it, and a number of people will have seen it at home, but some will have seen it in cinemas. So this is a drama about the atrocity committed by Anders Breivik in 2011. But more importantly, it's about the fallout of that. It's about the way in which a society responds to an atrocious event, the way in which a civilized society responds to a wholly uncivilized act. And what Paul Greengrass is trying to do, and I think he's sort of quite overtly trying to do it, is to say this is a drama about dealing with atrocity rather than the atrocity itself. We have a clip? We do. Let's have a go.
I will be allowed to speak at the trial.
This hasn't been decided yet.
No, that's very important. There are witnesses I need to cross-examine.
Anders, you can't call the Prime Minister. Norway isn't on trial. You are.
Are you sure about that?
And a lot of what the film is then subsequently about is how Norway reacts and how the legal system reacts and how, his relationship with his defense lawyer, who has, is part and parcel of this. We have to behave civilized. We have to do something which allows a fair trial. But most importantly, that we have to hear other voices. And on the one hand, when Paul Greengrass was talking about it, he was saying that, it's to do with the idea of no platforming and the idea of censorship and how much freedom of speech should be allowed. At what point does freedom of speech become an infringement of liberties? But it's also about, as I keep saying, a civilized response to an utter atrocity. Now, there is another film about these same events, which is the Eric Popper film, which is variously called Utoya 22nd July or U 22 July. And this had played at festivals. And this is a very, very different film, got very good responses, in which basically you're seeing it from the point of view of those being attacked, in which the central figure of the terrorist is completely in the background. And it is a totally different film. One of the criticisms that was levelled against 22 July is that it is a film about the terrorist. And I have to say that I don't think it is, because I think that what the film is about is exactly what Greengrass says it's about. It's about how you respond to something like this. And what you see is a society that is absolutely, stricken with horror and grief, not somehow abandoning the codes that have made them a civilized society. So it is in many ways sort of, oddly polemical. Paul Greengrass has a background in journalism, and what he's interested in is the response. There is obviously a sequence which depicts the attack itself. It's briefer than one may remember, because watching that sequence is very, very hard, although actually it is fairly contained. Again, Paul Greengrass was saying in the interview that he had tried to be discreet without understating the horror. There's no getting around it. It is absolutely horrifying, that sequence. And the whole movie is very difficult to watch, because you're talking about very recent history, and you're talking about such an act of horror and savagery that there's always a question about whether or not any film can or should deal with that subject. But I do think that what the film has tried to do is to move it on to a discussion of how you respond. And I think that in that respect, it works. And I think it works honourably. And, Paul Greengrass was talking as well about the decision to do it in the English language, and he said very honestly, he said, look, the thing is, this is the language that I speak, and I can only direct it in this language because I actually can't, otherwise I won't be able to, And when I had heard that that's what the film was, I have to say that I was concerned about it. Watching the movie, I didn't feel concerned about it at all. It actually because for me that can be a problem. The fact that it wasn't, I think, is an indicator of just how successfully the film works. So I think it's very powerful. I think it is quite honourably attempting to deal with a subject of how do you deal with this sort of event, and I think it isn't exploitative, and I think that's very important. I think it is made from a point of view of wishing to move a debate on about, as I keep saying, how you respond and how much the strength of a democracy and a civilized society is to do with, with your responses to these kind of things. And a point that Paul Greengrass made last week about young people really being at the vanguard of protecting that democracy. It's a tough watch, and I think you feel the same way. But that is exactly what it should be.